Good morning, class. Sorry I can't be there with you today. I'd like to talk with you really quickly here about what you did last week and what you'll be doing this week in art class. As you remember, we talked about photography last week as an art form, and your job was to learn 4 concepts. We talked about overexposure, underexposure. By exposure, I mean exposure to light. Talked about sharp and blurry photographs. We talked about high contrast and low contrast photography. We talked about different aspect ratios, which means different shapes of your photos. Anyway, I expected you to show me 2 examples of each of those 4 concepts in one Google slide and turn it into Google Class last week. Where do you find that? Well, if you go to Google Class, you can scroll down from the top to where it says 2-Visual Arts. And it says Monday, October 5th, that's last week's Asynchronous Learning Day task. If you click on that, this will drop down your assignment, and inside of this you'll see an example screen that I created. So quickly, let's have a look at the example screen that I made for you. So here's the example screen that I made for you, and you were to refer to this last week for your at-home task. Anyway, as you can see, I have an example here of 2 different aspect ratios. One is a square and one is a rectangle, same photograph. I have an example here of extreme high contrast and low contrast, with each one being pointed to. Example of blurry and sharp, and it's very obvious which one is which. And I have an example of overexposed to light, which I labeled, and underexposed to light. And the whole slide, all 8 photographs, are labeled photography concepts. This is your first slide for our unit. We're going to end up adding 1 slide every week onto this presentation. And so in the end of our 4 weeks, you'll have 4 slides that you turn in for a grade. Moving on, I want to show you just a couple of examples of people's work that got turned in. They're very normal examples. I'm not picking on these people in any way, but I do want to show them to you because if I say something about them that strikes you as something maybe that you did wrong or you can fix, then go back to yours today and fix yours right away, please. So without going on further, I'm going to just say this is a great looking slide in a way. I don't know whose this is, but photography concepts is clearly and it's kind of artistically put on the page, actually. Good job. I wish there was a background color to get some extra points for the looks of the screen, and I wish that all the images had a nice frame around them. To add a frame on an image, you just click on the image, and you go up to here, to these border weight selectors, and you can choose the thickness of the border that you want to do. You can also choose the color of the border by going up to here and choosing the color of your border. I hope that's clear, and now you kind of understand how to add borders. So keep that in mind. It is relevant and important how your screen looks, not just what's on your screen. Moving on, this student shows me clearly that overexposure is here, underexposure is here. High contrast is clearly there, low contrast there. Aspect ratios. Now, this person did a typical thing that is kind of wrong, and I want to show you. Zooming in and zooming out does not give you 2 different aspect ratios. Aspect ratio has to do with the shape of your image, and since both of these are the same rectangular shape, here and here, I mean the photograph itself, right? Then this person does not demonstrate they understand what 2 different aspect ratios is. So please, when you're doing yours, and maybe you'll have to go back and fix this in your slide 1 from last week, make sure that you understand one should be a square and one should be a rectangle. Or one should be turned landscape and one should be turned vertically, portrait. Lastly, sharp and blurry. Yeah, that's pretty good. I can kind of see the difference. I wish it was a stronger difference, but not bad. Again, this person can go back and fix this, put borders around everything, add a background color, I'd say make the labels a bit heavier and bolder, and then they're done. Then, once the person has done that, they need to create another slide on the same presentation. The second slide for this presentation will be this week's slide. Okay. Now, where do you find information about this week's slide and our concepts? Well, again, if you go back to Google Classroom and you slide down, you'll see Visual Arts Slide 2. And again, the date is Monday next week. That's your at-home for your entire grade day. This will be due, this task, Slide 2, the next day by 8 a.m. for an attendance grade. So if you click on this assignment, you're going to go into instructions, and you're going to read about these instructions. I'll go over them with you right now. So for next Monday, the 12th, you're to create one new Google slide that shows you understand the following terms: unique point of view, repetition, light and shadow, and expressive photography. I'm going to have you, for this last one, take a picture of a rock or a stick. Okay? I know that sounds like a boring subject, but let's face it, anyone can take a good picture, a beautiful artistic photograph of a beautiful waterfall. But if you can take a picture of a stick or a rock and make it look beautiful, artistic, and amazing, then that means you're quite a good photographer, in my opinion. How do you do this? Well, you're going to take one photograph for each of the above concepts right here. You're going to put your photos onto slide 2 of last week's Google slide, like I showed you. You're going to label your photos like in my example that I'll show you in a bit. And you're going to title your screen Composition and Expression, also in my example that I'll show you next. Again, this is in Google Slide, your task. And you're going to click on, for information, this slideshow right here, which will take you through those 4 concepts here: unique point of view, repetition, light and shadow, and shooting expressively. And then it'll show you an example of what this week's slide will look like. Let's go through the show together right now. Okay, so first of all, we see it says week 2. There are 4 new photo skills. They're a little bit more complicated than last week, so pay attention. First, shooting a unique point of view. As you can see, shooting from a unique point of view requires you to put yourself in a strange position. Now, don't climb a tree and fall out and break your arm, please. Be safe, but you may have to lay on the ground, like you see my student took a picture here from the worm's eye view. And here, from an above view. And here again, their friend was hanging from a basketball rim. They took it from below. This one's interesting and unique because, well, you don't find yourself very often walking along a pole or a rod like this. So that is a unique point of view because they got down very low to this thing. So the first photograph you have to take for homework is a photograph from an extreme or unique point of view. The next photograph you're going to take is showing repetition. Now, this right here in the top left is a photograph submitted to me by a student who shot some rocks, but really circles are being repeated here, or circular shapes. And here below it, lines are being repeated. Here, circles are being repeated again. And here in this photograph, it's a lamp or something. I don't know what it is, but it looks cool because there's repetition of shapes going on, complex shapes. Again, for this one, I don't care what you photograph or how it looks really, but I don't even care if I know what it is, but it needs to show repetition. Thirdly, and almost lastly, photography comes from a Latin word being a combination of words. Photo, meaning light, and graph, meaning to write with. So literally in Old Latin, the word photograph means thing written with light. So what is photography really? Well, when you take a picture of anything, you're really painting with light using a camera or your phone. So you're capturing light and shadow. Here a student submitted to me a picture of her hand, and since she had no window light or strong light outside at sunset, she used a flashlight, a torch, to light up her hand and took a picture that way. I don't care if you shoot in black and white for any of these. It looks beautiful if you do, it's fine. Here she had her sister against a window, so the light is coming from one side and the shadow is on the other. And here again, they were inside, they flashlighted a wall, and you can see strong light and shadow. Now, every picture has light and shadow, but what I want yours to show is extreme light and shadow. In other words, I want you to push the darkness and lightness in your image, like you see in these examples. You're going to show me one example, like in all the concepts this week. Our last point of discussion is how to shoot a photograph expressively. As you can see, when I gave this class an assignment to shoot a photograph of stairs, this student on the left shot a snapshot of stairs. This person on the right, you can see, took an artistic sort of photograph of stairs. I want you to take a picture of a rock or a stick for your last photograph, expressively. The question is, how did the person on the right achieve an expressive feel to their photograph? Well, obviously you can see that light and shadow are used, whereas here, light is used but no shadow. Also, because light and shadow is used here, we see textures and things like that. So be expressive. You can edit your photographs, but don't use a filter called, I don't know, Beautify filter or Fun filter or Rainbow filter. Instead, you can edit them just using black and white, or you can edit them using contrast, sharpness, etc. Here are some things to think about as you begin to contemplate how to photograph your rock or stick when you're at home in an artistic way. The first point is time of day. If you think about it, my shadow is smallest in the noontime. It's right below me. But in the evening time, you see that your shadow is actually very long behind you, like you see on the right side. So therefore, you're going to get nice long shadows and strong lights and shadows if you take pictures in the evening time of your rock or stick. Here's your task. It's repeated what I read you earlier on. It's repeated in the slideshow. And lastly, I'll show you this. Here is an example I made for you of what you're to create this week. I have a student's photograph of light and shadow here. I have a student's photograph of repetition here. I don't know what this is. I think it's like window shutters, window shades. And here I have a student's picture of an extreme or unique point of view. They're all labeled light and shadow, repetition, and unique point of view. Your job is to do the same, not the same photographs, but to demonstrate something for each of these concepts. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, your photograph, the final one in this slide, should show a rock or a stick. For this photograph, I laid that on my belly. At sunset, you can see the color on the stick is kind of yellowish, and the shadow is long. At sunset, in other words. And I took this picture with a very sharp point right there, and then a blurry background. It's very difficult to make a picture of a stick or a rock, whatever you choose, look beautiful, but I think I did an okay job here. I've labeled it expressive stick. If yours is a rock, you call it expressive rock. And lastly, you're going to title your screen Composition and Expression. Again, just like last week, I don't care how you organize your screen, but I need all these things to be on your screen. And lastly, this is going to be an extension of last week's task, so this should be the second slide on the same presentation. Where do you turn this in? Again, you're going to turn it in on Google Classroom in Classwork, where it says 2-Visual Arts. What is your assignment for today? Well, first, if you have work to do on last week's slide 1, then go back and work on it and make it more beautiful in class right now. Secondly, if you are done and you're perfectly happy with last week's slide 1 example, slide 1 that you did, then you may begin shooting at your desk your 4 concepts for this week. But I want to tell you, you might want to go home and shoot those because I expect more out of you now as far as how quality your photographs are. That said, a student last class came to me and said, Mr. Myers, I can't shoot repetition. Do you see repetition around the room? And I said, what's in your bag? And she pulled out some colored pencils. So I said, hold these colored pencils in your hand. And here's what she did. She held these colored pencils and I took a picture with my phone. And I said, put the pencils on the desk. And she did. And I took a picture here and there. As you can see, all 3 of these photographs I took with items from her bag in class on her desk look pretty good, and they show repetition. So at least that's one thing that you can shoot as an example from your desk at your classroom. Don't get her up and walk around unless your teacher approves of this behavior. So I hope you all understand your task. I'll be meeting with you, I hope, if I'm allowed to come back tomorrow, and I'll talk with you further. But by tomorrow, I expect you all to have examples of your topics we talked about today. Light and shadow, repetition, unique point of view, and an expressive stick or rock. Your homework tonight is to shoot 1 example of each of those at home, or a really quality one in class now. If there are any questions, you can email me. I'll be at my computer all day. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your task today. Bye-bye.